Okay, so good morning, everybody, and welcome to our convening of CDL schools here in Missouri. We have mostly certified schools on the line, but we have or will have some community colleges online because they also offer CDL programs. The majority of our focus is going to be on the certified schools and what we will need in order to make sure you're good to go to meet the federal regulations. So to kick it off, I'm Laura Wiedenhop. I am the Director of Academic Affairs at the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development in the Office of Secondary Policy. And my team works with the certified schools and with the public institutions and a little bit with the independent institutions. And I introduce my staff. We have Leslie Winter. She's our program specialist. A lot of you probably work very closely with her on recertifications past. And we also have Mr. Stephen Deo. He is our, what's the title? Associate Research Analyst?
Something yeah, like I think so.
Yeah. Almost like that. Stephen's fairly new. And I don't know if it was his first day on the job or his second day, but it's like, hey, the feds have a new regulation coming out regarding CDLs. Why don't you learn all you can about it? And so he is kind of our resident expert on these new regulations. Stephen will also be participating on the governor's task force that is going to be established to increase the number of truck drivers and CDL holders in Missouri, because you guys probably already know there's a huge demand and we just aren't getting enough drivers in the pipeline. So what we're going to do today is Stephen is going to give you his little presentation on the federal regulations. Leslie is going to go over what is going to be required from the certified schools for recertification coming up. And it'll be a little weird because, of course, recertification opens January 1st, but these particular regulations don't go into effect until February 7th. So we want to make sure that everybody gets the information they need to meet standards. After which we will open it up for some Q&A, and then we'll be done. We're scheduled for an hour and a half. Honestly, I think it'll take maybe a half an hour unless there's a lot of involved discussion. If anybody has specific questions that can't be answered in the Q&A part, I did put Leslie and Stephen's email in the chat, and you can just send them your questions by email or give them a call later and they can walk you through the answers to whatever that you need. So with that, I am just going to close my window because I have to get onto another call, but I will go ahead and turn it over to Stephen. And if you could go ahead and start your PowerPoint, sir, tell them all there is to know that you have learned.
You see it okay? There we go. Is it popping up?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Alrighty, so as you all have probably heard, there's the new ELDT requirements. They're going to be starting next year, February 7th, 2022. So there's quite a few changes coming through with that. Not only for like the registry, but also with curriculum and things like that. So this is going to be a quick overview of a lot of that stuff. So the first portion that is kind of the most important, I think, out the gate would be the new training provider registry. And it's TPR for short, but this is going to be something that all of the training providers will have to register their institutions with. And so as you can see, number one there is training providers first register with the TPR, and then the next one is the driver data. So after institutions register with the TPR and they're approved by the federal government and FMCSA, then drivers will need their uploaded data onto the TPR from the institutions. So essentially, whenever students go through your guys' CDL courses and they complete, then the information must be uploaded to the TPR by midnight of the second business day after student completion. Not sure why they chose that particular time frame, but that's what's listed in the current regulation. So it's very important that that data is uploaded, because in order for these students to take the test with the Missouri State Highway Patrol, the data has to be able to be drawn from the TPR. So the state has to be able to pull the student data from the TPR that was uploaded by the institution. So it's kind of a connected system there. Number 3 for the TPR is just storage. It retains all that student information. And then number 4, as I explained before, state testing agencies will obtain all the student information from the TPR. So that's that. And the data must include kind of a whole list of things. This is stuff that you'll already be providing pretty much, the trainee name, date of birth, license and permit number, and state of issuance, their CDL class and type, what did they train for, the specifics and the type of training completed. So did they complete their theory training and their behind the wheel training, and their scores if applicable, their total clock numbers for behind the wheel, and so on and so forth. One of them on there is the name of the training provider and the unique TPR ID. So whenever you register for the TPR, you'll be given a unique TPR identification number. And now, I'm not sure if you're going to get a unique one for each location that you register, if you have multiple locations, but we do know for sure you're at least going to get one TPR ID number, and that'll be really important as well.
Hi, Stephen. May I ask a question or two as you go along, or should we hold questions to the end? How would you like?
We could probably hold them to the end, and then we can do during the Q&A, we can go through those. But if you want to write them in the chat, just in case if we forget them and things like that, you can go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. So the next part, who does this affect? It's going to be your entry-level drivers. So these are drivers with less than 1 year experience operating a CMV with a CDL in interstate commerce, right? So there are 3 kind of main portions. A student obtaining their Class A or Class B CDL for the first time is ELDT. A student who's upgrading their existing Class B CDL to a Class A CDL, and a student who's obtaining their school bus passenger or hazardous materials endorsement for the first time would be ELDT as well. So these are kind of the main 3 categories that include your entry-level driver training. There are some exceptions to the entry-level driver trainings, and those are individuals who hold a valid CDL, school bus passenger, or hazardous prior to the new implementation date, as well as applicants who obtain their learner's permit prior to the date, as long as they obtain their CDL before their existing learning permit is expired. So if someone were to receive their CLP today, as long as they test before that CLP expires, they can do it after this implementation day, and it's okay that it doesn't meet the new reg, right? So those are the only 2 exceptions there. Next would be kind of each of the requirements, right? So first is registration, as we talked about at the beginning. So training providers must register and self-certify that their program meets all federal and state requirements, and all locations are unique in the TPR. So say you have 3 locations, once you register your institution for TPR, you have to register each of your locations individually on your account, right? So that is one important thing, as well as the self-certification that you meet state requirements, right? So it's required that schools are certified by the state, and the state has verified that it meets all the federal needs. So that's one of the biggest things. One of them is must be registered by February 7, 2022, or the institution cannot be considered a CDL training institution. So if an institution is not part of TPR, after February 7th, 2022, when it goes live, the state will not be able to test students coming out of your programs because they won't be able to draw that data from TPR. So it's pretty important. And last, must submit registration even if institution is not providing education to the general public. This is included in the new regulations. It's kind of a niche sort of thing, but thought I'd throw it in there. Number 2, curriculum. This is where a lot of the big changes come in as well. So the first box will go left to right, top to bottom here. So the first box here, no minimum required hours for instruction for either theory or behind the wheel instruction. They did not indicate a minimum amount of hours for either one of those. The second box, training providers must register as a theory provider, a behind the wheel provider, or both within the TPR. So you pretty much just have to say, my institution offers both theory and behind the wheel training. Or some institutions may only offer the theory portion or only offer the behind the wheel portion. There is an online exemption available. If your institution only offers theory training, you can get an exemption if it's purely online training for theory. Right? Obviously, behind the wheel cannot be purely online. And so that is the only exemption available in terms of curriculum from TPR. The next one, must complete curriculum within 1 year of each other unless seeking a hazardous endorsement. This one's pretty straightforward overall. So if a student finishes their theory instruction, they need to finish the next section of the curriculum within 1 year. It all needs to be completed in a concise time frame before they go into testing. Starting at the bottom here, simulation can be used for theory, but not for behind the wheel. So simulation training is a type of training some CDL schools use. It obviously cannot be used for behind the wheel training because students need that experience. The next one for Class A, and this is just some informational parts, and I have links to these as well. If you want all of the curriculum standards for Class A and Class B licenses, it's in Appendix A and B of Part 380 of the EU regulations. And then the last box would be the passenger, school bus, or hazardous is in the Appendix C, D, and E respectively to Part 380 as well. And I have links to those, no problem. 3 will be the instructors. Not too much has changed on this, but we thought it'd be good to go over. So instructors must hold or have held a previous CDL of the same or higher class with all endorsements necessary to operate a CMV. And they have to have this in conjunction with either of these two things, so one or the other. At least 2 years experience driving a CMV with the required CDL license, or at least 2 years experience as a behind the wheel CMV instructor. So in conjunction with either one of those. One important note is if your CDL was revoked at any time in your lifetime pretty much, that instructor is required to get their CDL again and wait 2 total years before they become eligible to be a provider again. So that's kind of an important note whenever looking for instructors and things like that. Next one, facilities, vehicles, and licensing. Not much has really changed on this. It's pretty much the same. Obviously, training can be on a range, it can be on a public road. It's optional for the institutions. The trucks must match the class for the test, obviously. So if you want to take a Class A or a Class B, you should be driving a truck that's over 26,000 pounds, and so on and so forth for the other ones. And you must be certified by the state, except for all online theory instruction. This is where you can apply for an exemption. So not too much has changed there. Next one will be assessment. This is where a little bit of change happened. For the theory instruction, assessments must be used for the students, and these will be like exams and things, and students must pass with 80% or better on these exams. So a lot of schools typically have, a 70% margin for the theory instruction on CDL schools. Now it'll be an 80% proficiency requirement. On the other end, we have the behind the wheel instruction. And for this, trainers must evaluate and document all of the hours and the proficiencies in the skills, but there is no minimum once again. So while there are no minimum hours, it is expected that there's some sort of assessment in terms of training providers checking off skills and ensuring that students are, passing each of the skills they need to pass, as well as documentation of the hours it took them to do that. And last, this is kind of a big one. It'll be record keeping. This will again be left to right, top to bottom. So the first one will be self-certifications. Driver trainees, so students that are going into your schools, they will need to comply with all state and federal regulations for behind the wheel training in relation to controlled substances, alcohol testing, age, medical certifications, licensing, driving record, all that good stuff. It's stuff that most institutions are already requiring, right? But the new federal requirements want some sort of self-certification that the students are doing that. The next one will be a copy of the trainee's CLP or previous CDL and the training provider registration form. So whenever a student comes to sign up, basically the federal government wants to have these copies of their CLPs or CDLs on hand at the institution. The next one will be the instructor qualification documentation. This is pretty simple to go by, right? So if instructors have been holding CDLs for some amount of time and have their experience, just having that on a record on hand at the institution. Down towards the bottom now, the lesson plans for theory and behind the wheel training curriculum. So it's now an expectation to have records of all curriculum that is being taught at the institutions that you can show at any time The next one would be records of the individual entry-level driver training assessments. So this was that theory training assessments and the behind the wheel documentation from the previous slide. So they want records of what those students are doing and are they passing to the required margins. And then the last one, all records must be maintained for at least 3 years after receival. So that's kind of the big change for record keeping. And why is this important? The FMCSA can audit any institution, anytime, no questions asked, right? So if someone tips off an institution, then the FMCSA can come in and say, hey, do you have all this stuff? And if you don't have it, it could result in removal from the TPR, which in turn is removal of your CDL school entirely from being able to offer education. So one of the important things for TPR as well is to stay up to date. So if there are any key changes to your institution, whether that be the name, the address, phone number, courses, trainers, change in state status like certification, it's important to report those within 30 days. And when it comes to TPR, every other year, you must confirm your TPR registration, even if there's no changes. So every other year must continually confirm that you are registered with the TPR. Kind of an interesting system, but that's one of the key things right there. And I believe that is all. Yeah, I got some links here at the end. And some of these are a little bit outdated now whenever I made this PowerPoint, but the TPR people have a bunch more kind of guides and videos and things and more links that I can share with you as well. But yeah, so I think after this, I'm turning it over to Leslie for recertification, and then we'll go into a Q&A.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to go over the CDL requirements for recertification for certified schools. You all need to submit any changes, if needed, to the curriculum in Advera that are required by the updated regulations before completing your recertification application. This means if your program has hours that are included in the CDL testing, you have to revise that curriculum to take the testing completely out of the program. So when you're completing the recertification application, we're going to request that you put your new federal ID from the TPR in the comment section of the recertification application so we can verify that you are with them. And then in order to complete recertification and receive your certificate, you must have that federal information to us during recertification. And that's all I have for that.
Alrighty, I think I see a few questions in chat. So is there a date by which training providers must register prior to the February effective date? No, they have not signified, you must be signed up by January something. You just need to be signed up before it goes into effect. The website goes live February 7th, 2022. You can register now. It is open for registration. And all the schools here, I'm pretty sure, are certified with us already. So you're clear to go through that self-certification that you are certified by the state, and you can sign up now. And it's best to be signed up as early as possible. And then can the presentation be emailed to attendees? Yeah, we can definitely email the presentation to all attendees after this, no problem. And then.
Thank you for that, Stephen. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, not a problem, not a problem. I'm going to expand the chat here so I can read the next. So for certified schools, if the school is not registered with the TPR by February 7th, we're expecting they'll be enrolled soon to do that. Okay, yeah. And then if the institution signed up by 2/7, can we add applications at a later date? If you are offering education at that location, it needs to be registered if education is being offered already. So it's expected that any location offering education will be registered and approved by the TPR, because whenever you apply for these locations, they do go through and approve them. So it's expected to be approved before any education is offered by that time. Will the student records format change in proprietary system, entering and exiting? I do not think there'll be any changes with the prop record system, because it'll be kind of different from the records that the federal requirements have. So what is the website? I'll link it real quick here.
Number.
So here is the website for the TPR. And then.
Oh God. We gotta get on here, man. I'm listening to it right now, and they're
And then,
showing how to get on there and do everything on the computer right now.
and then here is
He's talking, saying,
it's a PDF for the
"Do you
House
have it on there
Registry.
yet?"
So if you go to TPR on the main website, then you can click log in or email sign up or various things. You can sign up on the main website, and then that PDF will walk you through the steps. If you're not big on the PDF, I believe there's also a video on how to do it, and it is right here. So it's a kind of a dry video. I watched it a few times, and it's very slow, and it's not the greatest video in the world, but it gets the job done. So that's what's good about it. So yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yay, this is Laura. I'm back for just a little bit. They haven't gotten to my important stuff on the meeting yet. Good job, Stephen. Good job, Leslie. Thank you. Last call for question.
I have a quick question. If you have a class going before the February 7th date hits, do those students have to be tested prior to February 7th? Is that correct? Or are you allowed to finish that class out?
Yeah, so if all of those students have held their CLP prior to February 7th, which if they're testing with you or if they're training with you, then they obviously probably have their CLP, then it's okay that they are tested regularly as long as they had that CLP prior to the implementation date. So if you have that existing class that maybe goes over that February 7th line, they should be able to test. It's that one exception class. And I think that exception class only exists obviously for this implementation year to kind of avoid that situation where if you have an existing class, it suddenly has this new implementation, then it's kind of hard to test students at that point, right? But yeah.
And the other thing, I was a little confused on as far as with registering with the state. If we're already registered, our curriculum hasn't really changed that much other than what we've added to it based on the book that we were using. Did I hear that right? That we have to certify back with that curriculum with the state before we apply for the approval?
Yeah,
So-
so basically, oh, sorry.
I was just going to comment that if a lot of schools right now have the testing as part of their 120 hours, 160 hours or something, that has to change. You either need to reduce the number of hours of your training or offer additional training to cover the time that would have been allotted to CDL testing. So that information that needs to be updated for those schools in Advera for certified schools. And then Stephen, you had a comment?
Yeah, in addition to that, when it comes to curriculum overall, now whenever we're checking for schools during recertification and initial certification, we're going to be basing the curriculum off of the federal guidelines, right? So if our current schools, even like all our schools have their current curriculum, but if that curriculum doesn't meet the new federal guidelines, then we won't be able to certify or recertify schools unless that curriculum meets those federal guidelines. And I can link the curriculum requirements as well here.
Some of that information, could that be just sent to everybody that's on here in an email? Or,
Yeah, we can definitely do that as well. I can include the links in the PowerPoint as well.
that'd be helpful.
And if anybody perhaps got their link from somebody else and were not included on the email that Leslie has been sending out, Leslie and Stephen's email are in the chat, so you can just contact them and say, hey, I didn't get a copy of the slides or the links, and then they will hook you up.
And then I just added a link to the curriculum breakdown from the TPR. And that breaks down, Class A, Class B, and all of the materials.
Okay, last call for questions. All right. Well, thank you everybody for taking time out this morning to learn more about the new CDL regulations. And again, if you have any questions, just contact us and we'll be happy to give you the answers or find out how you can get those. Please keep an eye out on your email over the next few hours and we will send you those slides and links. Thank you all.